The Peace Movement, 20th Century Onwards, Global. The peace movement encompasses a diverse array of organizations and individuals who advocate for nonviolent solutions to conflicts, oppose wars, and work towards the elimination of nuclear weapons. This movement has its roots in the anti-war protests that gained prominence during World War I and saw significant activity during the Vietnam War, where widespread public demonstrations highlighted the human cost of military conflict. Key components of the peace movement include advocating for disarmament, promoting conflict resolution and diplomacy, and challenging the economic and political interests that often underlie warfare. Influential figures such as Martin Luther King Jr. and organizations like the International Peace Bureau have been instrumental in mobilizing support and influencing public policy towards more peaceful approaches. The movement has helped to bring about important treaties, such as the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and various peace accords that have ended regional conflicts. Moreover, it raises awareness about the devastating impacts of war on communities, environments, and future generations, thereby fostering a global culture that prioritizes peace over conflict. Despite facing challenges such as political inertia and the interests of the military-industrial complex, the peace movement continues to strive for a world where dialogue and cooperation replace aggression and division. The Feminist Movement, 19th Century Onwards, Global. The feminist movement is a diverse and dynamic global movement that seeks to challenge and rectify systemic inequalities faced by women in various spheres of life, including legal, political, economic, and social domains. Originating in the 19th century with a focus primarily on legal inequalities such as voting rights, the movement has evolved to address a wide array of issues including gender-based violence, reproductive rights, equal pay, and the representation of women in politics and business. Feminism has historically been divided into waves, each with its own distinct focus and achievements. The first wave in the late 19th and early 20th centuries centered on suffrage and property rights. The second wave, arising in the 1960s, broadened the agenda to issues of equality and anti-discrimination. The third wave from the 1990s onwards embraced an even more inclusive and intersectional approach, recognizing the diverse experiences of women across races, classes, and nationalities. Key successes of the movement include the adoption of the 19th Amendment in the United States granting women the right to vote, the establishment of the UN Women's Commission, and various laws and policies worldwide that promote gender equality. Despite these gains, challenges remain, such as combating systemic sexism and ensuring comprehensive rights for all women, regardless of their background. The feminist movement continues to adapt and respond to new societal challenges, reflecting the ongoing struggle for gender equality and the empowerment of women globally.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
The Civil Disobedience Movement, led by Mahatma Gandhi, 1930 to 1947, India. The Civil Disobedience Movement, led by Mahatma Gandhi, was a pivotal chapter in India's quest for independence from British rule. This movement was based on Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha, which translates to insistence on truth. It advocated nonviolent resistance as a means to oppose imperial authority and injustice. The movement began with the Salt March in 1930, where Gandhi and thousands of followers marched 240 miles to the sea to make their own salt, defying the British monopoly. This act of making salt was symbolic and strategic, targeting a British tax on salt that affected the vast majority of Indians. The simplicity and brilliance of the protest lay in its appeal to a common hardship faced by all classes of Indians, thereby unifying a diverse population in a mass challenge to colonial power. Over the years, the movement expanded, including refusal to pay taxes, boycotting British goods, and peaceful picketing of liquor shops and foreign cloth stores. The movement not only mobilized millions of Indians but also captured international attention, highlighting the struggle for Indian independence and altering global perceptions of British imperialism. The strength of the movement lay in its moral stance against oppression, demonstrating the power of nonviolence and civil disobedience as tools for social and political change. Gandhi's approach influenced civil rights movements worldwide, showing that enduring change could be achieved through peaceful means. The Anti-Nuclear Movement, 20th Century Onwards, Global. The anti-nuclear movement is a significant global social movement that emerged strongly in the mid-20th century. It focuses on opposing nuclear weapons and nuclear power, driven by concerns over environmental, health, and humanitarian risks associated with nuclear technologies. The movement gained momentum in the aftermath of World War II, particularly following the catastrophic effects of atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. These events vividly illustrated the devastating human costs of nuclear warfare and sparked a moral outcry against the use of such weapons. As nuclear technology evolved, the movement also began to address the dangers of nuclear power generation, highlighted by accidents such as the 3 Mile Island incident in 1979 in the United States and the Chernobyl disaster in 1986 in the Soviet Union. These accidents brought to light the long-term environmental risks and the potential for catastrophic human error associated with nuclear power plants. Activists within the movement employ a variety of tactics including mass protests, lobbying, and participation in international treaties aimed at nuclear disarmament and the promotion of alternative, sustainable energy sources. A notable success of the movement was the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, adopted by the United Nations in 2017, which marked a significant step towards the goal of a nuclear-free world. The movement's ongoing challenge lies in balancing energy needs with environmental and safety concerns, particularly as debates over climate change intensify the search for non-fossil fuel energy sources. The anti-nuclear movement continues to play a crucial role in shaping policies and public opinion on the use and development of nuclear technology. The Indigenous Rights Movement, 20th Century Onwards, Global. The Indigenous Rights Movement is a global effort dedicated to safeguarding the rights, cultures, and lands of indigenous peoples. Originating in various parts of the world throughout the 20th century, this movement seeks to address historical injustices and contemporary challenges faced by indigenous communities, including marginalization, loss of land, denial of cultural rights, and environmental degradation due to industrial exploitation. The movement is not just about addressing grievances, it's also about affirming the inherent sovereignty and self-determination of indigenous peoples. It champions the idea that these communities should manage their own lands and resources and maintain and develop their governance systems and cultural traditions. A pivotal aspect of the movement is the struggle against the appropriation and exploitation of indigenous lands, often for mining, logging, and agriculture by multinational corporations and national governments. Legal and political victories have been significant for the movement. The adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP, in 2007 marked a historic milestone, offering a comprehensive framework that recognizes the minimal standards for the survival, dignity, and well-being of indigenous peoples globally. Despite these advancements, the movement continues to face substantial challenges. Many indigenous communities remain vulnerable to economic disadvantages, health disparities, and ongoing legal and political battles over land rights and cultural preservation. The movement thus not only fights for the rights already declared but also for the genuine implementation of these rights, ensuring that indigenous voices are heard and respected on the global stage. The Chicano Movement, 1960s to 1970s, USA. The Chicano Movement, also known as El Movimiento, was a cultural and political movement that emerged in the 1960s and 1970s, focusing on empowering Mexican Americans and promoting civil rights, with a strong emphasis on education, political participation, and cultural expression. This movement was a response to decades of discrimination, segregation, and marginalization experienced by Mexican Americans in the United States, particularly in states such as California, Texas, and Arizona. One of the key issues was educational reform, as Chicano students faced racial segregation, high dropout rates, and a lack of bilingual education. The movement led to significant student walkouts, known as blowouts, in Los Angeles in 1968, which were pivotal in catalyzing change in the educational system. The movement also revived cultural pride with the concept of Chicanismo, which emphasized the importance of cultural heritage and identity. This was expressed through art, music, and literature, with figures like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta leading the way in labor rights, particularly in the agricultural sector. Their efforts were instrumental in the formation and success of the United Farm Workers Union, which fought for better wages and working conditions for farmworkers. Despite the decline in active protest activity by the late 1970s, the legacy of the Chicano movement lives on. It laid the groundwork for future advocacy for Latino rights in the U.S. and influenced subsequent generations of activists. The movement not only fought for specific civil rights but also fostered a renewed sense of identity and community solidarity among Chicanos, reshaping their role and representation in American society. The Chicano movement remains a testament to the power of collective action in advocating for racial and ethnic justice, and its impacts continue to influence discussions about identity, politics, and rights for minority communities in the United States. The Black Lives Matter movement, 2013 onwards, global. The Black Lives Matter, BLM, movement began in 2013 following the acquittal of the man who fatally shot Trayvon Martin, an unarmed African-American teenager. The movement was founded by 3 African-American community organizers, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi, who used the hashtag Black Lives Matter on social media to fuel a campaign against systemic racism and violence inflicted on Black communities. BLM gained significant momentum in 2014 after the police killings of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and Eric Garner in New York City, sparking nationwide protests and international solidarity. The central thesis of BLM is to confront and dismantle structures of racial inequality and violence, particularly in policing and the criminal justice system. The movement highlights how Black individuals are disproportionately subjected to police brutality and judicial injustices. It also addresses broader issues such as racial disparity in employment, education, and healthcare which contribute to systemic inequality. BLM represents a critical voice in redefining racial justice activism in the 21st century. Its advocacy extends beyond street protests. It includes policy proposals for police reform, community empowerment, and the redistribution of resources to marginalized communities. The movement's influence is evident in its global reach and its role in shaping public discourse about race, justice, and equality in society. BLM's approach combines traditional protest with digital activism, utilizing social media to amplify their message and mobilize community action quickly and effectively. This strategy has not only sustained their visibility but also facilitated a broader, more inclusive dialogue about racial justice globally. The Occupy movement, 2011 onwards, global. The Occupy movement burst onto the global stage in 2011, originating with Occupy Wall Street in New York City. The slogan, "We are the 99%, quickly became a rallying cry, encapsulating the movement's central theme, a protest against extreme wealth concentration in the hands of the 1% and the resultant social and economic inequality. This movement highlighted the growing disparity between the wealthy elite and the average citizens, spotlighting issues like unemployment, economic injustice, and the undue influence of corporations on government. Occupy camps sprang up in cities across the globe, from London to Sydney, creating spaces where people could come together to discuss solutions and express dissatisfaction with the current economic system. These encampments served as microcosms of society where participants experimented with direct democracy and collective living. The movement was notable for its leaderless, decentralized structure which relied on assemblies where all participants could speak and direct action was decided collectively. Despite the lack of a formal hierarchy and unified agenda, the Occupy movement succeeded in bringing visibility to economic inequality and influencing public discourse. It pressured political leaders to acknowledge and address the issues of corporate power and wealth disparity. The movement's legacy can be seen in how these themes have remained at the forefront of political debates and have influenced subsequent social justice movements. The Occupy movement's impact also extends to its methods. Its use of digital tools for organizing and communicating set a precedent for future activism, demonstrating the power of social media in mobilizing and sustaining social movement activism on a global scale. The Anti-Colonial Movements, 20th Century, global. The 20th century witnessed a profound shift in the global order with the rise of anti-colonial movements across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. These movements sought to overthrow colonial powers that had dominated vast territories and populations for centuries. The drive for independence was not merely political but also a profound assertion of cultural identity and self-determination. Anti-colonial movements varied widely in their strategies and contexts. In India, the struggle led by figures like Mahatma Gandhi employed nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience, capturing the imagination of the world and setting a precedent for other movements. In contrast, in Algeria and Vietnam, the fight for independence involved prolonged armed conflict, reflecting the harsher, more entrenched resistance from colonial powers like France. These movements were underpinned by a deeper critique of the imperial world system, which was seen as exploitative and dehumanizing. Intellectuals like Frantz Fanon wrote extensively on the psychological and cultural damage inflicted by colonialism, arguing for a violent catharsis as necessary for true liberation. Meanwhile, leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana advocated for Pan-African unity, seeing decolonization as a collective struggle that transcended national borders. The legacy of these movements is immense. They reshaped national identities, led to the creation of new nation-states, and forced a rethinking of international relations. They also inspired a global discourse on human rights and self-determination, influencing other marginalized groups to seek recognition and justice. The end of colonial rule did not, however, solve all problems. Many countries faced challenges of poverty, corruption, and internal conflict post-independence, partly due to the borders and governance structures imposed by colonial rulers, which often disregarded ethnic and cultural realities. The Temperance Movement, 19th–early 20th century, USA and Europe. The Temperance Movement, which gained significant traction in the 19th and early 20th centuries, was primarily driven by a moral and social campaign against the consumption of alcoholic beverages. Originating in the United States and spreading to Europe, the movement was rooted in the belief that alcohol was the cause of many societal problems, including domestic violence, moral decay, and poverty. Advocates of temperance argued that reducing or eliminating alcohol consumption would lead to a healthier, more morally upright society. The movement was closely tied to other reform movements of the time, including those advocating for women's rights and the abolition of slavery. Many women, in particular, championed the temperance cause, seeing it as a way to protect families and promote social welfare. The movement's influence led to the establishment of groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, in 1873, which linked temperance to Christian morality in women's empowerment. Temperance advocates employed various strategies to achieve their goals, ranging from educational campaigns and public lectures to lobbying for legal restrictions on the sale and production of alcohol. This culminated in significant legislative milestones, such as the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which instituted the national prohibition from 1920 to 1933. Similar legal measures were seen in parts of Canada, Scandinavia, and the UK. However, the outright prohibition of alcohol proved to be problematic. It led to unintended consequences, such as the rise of organized crime related to the illegal production and distribution of alcohol, and widespread non-compliance that ultimately undermined respect for the law. The economic implications during the Great Depression and the public backlash against the restrictions led to the repeal of prohibition in the United States in 1933 with the 21st Amendment. The temperance movement's legacy is complex. While it failed to sustain prohibition laws in the long term, it had a lasting impact on public attitudes towards alcohol and influenced the development of regulations concerning alcohol sales and advertising. The movement also contributed to broader social reforms, including advancing the role of women in public life and sparking discussions about public health and morality that continue to resonate today.